Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a brand new Mark III day drinking with Wes Hagen. That's what was it? What movie was that? It was a great film. Spinal Tap, Mark III, when they reinvent themselves as a jazz thing. Welcome everybody. So welcome to the new day drinking with Wes Hagen. We're doing things a little different tonight. I'm going to be tasting a wine with you, and tonight's really exciting. We're tasting a 2019, the first Cabernet Franc ever produced by J.Wilkes Winery. So we get to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to take a tiny break. I'm going to hit a reset button. We're going to start a brand new live, and we're going to do another 15 minutes on how to pull together beverage service for any size crowd. And we're talking water, sodas, beer, coffee, tea. I didn't think I did anything with tea, but you pretty much know how to handle that. How many bottles? How much liquid is necessary, and I'm going to give you guys some really cool ratios, and after the show I'm going to post it up on the Facebook page so you guys can see it. So welcome everybody, so glad you guys are here. I hope you guys are ready for a faster ride. We're going to compact the show. We're going to do one little 15-minute section talking about one wine, one varietal, and then we're going to go boom, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to just reset the buttons, and then we're going to do another one and talk tonight about how to make sure that whenever you have a party, whether it's for 10 people or 1,000 people, to know exactly how much liquid you need in the house and at the party to make sure everyone is happy, sated, and we'll also talk about making sure that everyone gets home safe, because that's obviously a very important thing as we move forward, is safety, science, care, and all things properly medical. So welcome. Please put something in your glass. Make sure you have something delicious. If you got some Cab Franc, that's great. I know you don't have the wine that I have because it hasn't even been released yet, because it is the 2019 J.Wilkes Cabernet Franc. And I opened this yesterday. I took notes on it, and then I closed it with one of my cool repour closures, which obviously has a proprietary material in it that absorbs oxygen from your bottle. It doesn't suck air out. It doesn't put specific air in. It doesn't cost $10 for a cartridge. These are about $2 a piece. They're great for one wine for a month. Tom Lutz, the guy who invented them, brilliant man, he suggests that it's just mainly for one bottle, but I found that if I have multiple samples open and I just use it for maybe a week or 10 days instead of the full month that he says it'll keep one bottle of wine right. Sent some to Bob Foster, who's one of the best palates I've ever worked with. He actually bought some and said they work pretty well too. I probably shouldn't use him as an example because he didn't give me permission, but he did say that he really thought that they worked well, and I found they worked well. Master sommeliers are feeling the same way. So it's a really cool way of keeping your wine fresh. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about Cabernet Franc, and let's get some in the glass. It is day drinking. It is beautiful outside. It was a little chilly today in Santa Maria Valley. It hit a high of only 72, 73 degrees. I went out this morning after I got some of my emails and my work done. I went out to go shoot some hoops and throw some frisbees, and I literally kept my sweater on until I'd been playing basketball for about 5 minutes and worked up a sweat, because it was still only like 64 degrees at 11:30 this morning in Santa Maria, California. I know it's 118 down in Phoenix. I'm sorry, but we do have the Pacific Ocean. This is why we don't grow Cabernet Franc in Santa Maria. That's why we have to go all the way up to Paso, Robles to really find the best Cabernet Franc for us, although there's some fabulous Cabernet Franc that's actually grown in the San Ynez Valley American viticultural area as well. Enough said, let's get to drinking. Cool, so Cabernet Franc is one of my favorite varieties. It is an ancient variety. It's been around for a really long time. There's some rumors that it's been around an incredibly long time, and it was first developed in Basque country, although that is still a little bit unsolved. We don't know exactly where it is, but we know Cabernet Franc is one of the foundational grapes, especially in southern France and within the Loire, the Languedoc and the Loire, for the development of all the grapes that we recognize. So, Merlot, Carmenere, Cabernet Sauvignon, all three of those grapes are at least 50% Cabernet Franc. So Cabernet Franc tends to get ripe a little bit earlier. So if you're in a region you can't get Cab fully ripe, what I find is if you can make decent Cabernet in some region, but you can't quite just get it ripe, Cabernet Franc is going to be the perfect grape for you. I remember tasting Cabernet Sauvignon in my early years in Santa Barbara County in the 90s and the early 2000s, and to be perfectly frank, I really wasn't that impressed with Cabernet Sauvignon in Santa Barbara County. It's getting better. It really is, especially with the development of Happy Canyon and some of those areas out there. But what I found is that Rick Longoria, one of my favorite winemakers in Santa Barbara, started producing these Cabernet Francs that were just absolutely gorgeous, and they became some of my wife's favorite red wine. So if you want to talk to Chanda about red wine, you better bring some Pinot Noir or some Cabernet Franc. Of course, Cabernet Franc is also produced in France and the Loire, probably to its greatest and highest extent. And of course, that would be in the areas of Chinon and Bourgueil. And those wines are spectacular for the money. I'll put them almost up with my Cru Beaujolais, my Morgons, my Fleuris, my all those wonderful little areas within the Beaujolais region, the Crus that make just such incredible wine. Okay, so now what we got going on, let's talk a little bit about what's in the glass. I always make sure you guys can see. This has passwords on it, so I have to be careful. It's pretty good color. So I made an incorrect statement yesterday, and that is I said that I thought this Cabernet Franc was 100% Cabernet Franc. Talked to John Crandall. You know who John Crandall is. He was just on a couple weeks ago. Great conversation. John Crandall let me know that this wine is 76% Cabernet Franc, 24% Cabernet. So I would call it kind of a more sort of a Bordeaux blend. And so there you go, 76%. So what are we going to expect from a beautiful Cabernet Franc? Well, I think a lot of times you're going to find the wines a little bit lighter and a little spicier. Maybe the tannins aren't quite as clunky. The tannins might be a little more fine than you would expect from a Cabernet Sauvignon. Oh, this one has opened up beautifully. Even though it hasn't had a lot of oxygen because of the re-pour stopper, it's showing a lot more raspberry fruit, a lot more primary fruit. I think the wine was a little dumb and beat up when I tasted it yesterday. Yesterday, what I said is the aromatic profile I gave it was vinous, which is a nice way of saying grapey. Primary and complex, Bordeaux-like aromas, raspberry, showy in the glass, cassis, herbs de Provence, crushed violet, brick dust. I've never used brick dust in a tasting note before, and I didn't actually steal it from a book. I was actually smelling it, and I was kind of thinking I was getting sort of I'm always looking for new ways to describe minerality that are not just mineral or saline or chalky or whatever, and I thought I like that kind of brick dust idea. Cured tobacco leaf, sage, cherry, spot on Cab Franc typicity. I thought the wine was just beautiful. Actually, Karen asked the question, if a wine is over 85% of one grape, you can put the name no. It's set in California, it's 75%. So I believe up in Oregon and Washington, it may be 85, but in California, we're pretty liberal in a lot of ways. And one way that classical liberalism has affected California is we allow people to describe their wines a little bit more descriptively and not prescriptively. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's put this beautiful kind of, what I would say is it, remember we talk about, is the wine opaque? If you lay it with pretty good incandescent lighting over a written word, can you read through it? And the answer is no, I cannot read through this. So this is it would be what I would call sort of a medium to heavy ruby opaque. That's the color that I would give it. On the entry, you can already tell it has great structure and it's quite dry. The attack, one thing also about Cabernet Franc, even though it ripens a little earlier, it does tend to hang on to a little more acidity. Even though Cabernet Sauvignon, for a full-bodied red wine, is actually considered fairly high acid in general, Cabernet Franc actually kind of trumps it just a little bit. It goes a little bit over and tends to show a little bit better acidity. The notes that I had originally wrote on this wine were young, perky, chewy, and effusively fruity. Youthful and bright on the attack with mouth-watering intensity in the middle of the palate, finishing with pervasive red and blackberry fruits, spice and earth, and an infant of a wine. The wine is not only delicious now, but will age gracefully up to a decade. And honestly, I think in a really, really good cellar, and it's just a 19. So, I mean, this is a nascent wine. This is an infantile wine. But I'm just getting all the things that I look for. The big fruit, the brightness, it's still tight, good acidity, really, really beautiful tannic structure. So this is a wine I really think would be a perfect wine for laying down. I believe it's going to be wine club and tasting room only, but you know me, you got the hookup. You can always send me a note. We can figure out how to get you a couple bottles when it's released. I don't know when it's going to be released, but it will be released. I would probably guess within just a couple months. It's bottled. It's tasting good. I just did the notes. We're going to start sending it out. Try to get some accolades on it. Should be wonderful that way. So what would I pair with it? What else? A couple other things. So I mentioned Chinon and Bourgueil, the two areas and villages within the Loire Valley, and specifically that produce Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc also tends to grow really well, where incredibly high quality Sauvignon Blanc will grow it well as well. How about where it's grown? So by far, I would say that France represents about 80 to 85% of all Cabernet Franc planted in the world. After that, what do you think the next country would be? Italy. Italy is actually number 2. They actually grow a fair amount of Cabernet Franc to make Super Tuscans in the Chianti region, or basically between what I guess that would be Firenze and not Lucca. What was I thinking? Basically within the Tuscany region is where it's mainly grown. Number 3. Okay, so number 3 and number 4. So which one is Argentina and which one's the United States? Who has more Cabernet Franc? Who do you think? You think we got 2 choices, Argentina or USA? And the answer is ding, Argentina. Not by a whole lot, but Argentina does have more planted acreage of Cabernet Franc than in the United States. And in the United States, we're seeing a little bit of extra Cabernet Franc being grown and planted. We might actually catch up to Argentina because the East Coast and areas that traditionally have not shown an extraordinary capacity to growing full-bodied red wines are finding great luck with Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc seems to be the key to a lot of locks of soil and climate. There are certain locks that we just don't understand in the United States because we are such a new wine-growing region. There's regions that have been growing wine for 10,000 years. And really, we have just been really getting pretty serious about grapes since the either end of Prohibition, or you could even argue basically since the University of California at Davis. You look at guys like Telechev, you look at guys like Amrin, you look at guys like Winkler. Those are the guys that really fundamentally changed wine. And the reason, mainly I think that American wine and California wine became one of the most important regions in the world for learning about wine and learning the science about wine. Because honestly, from Pasteur to Prohibition, not a lot happened. I mean, people were interested in wine science. They were learning about fermentation kinetics and science and technology. And then, in the United States at least, we got Prohibition, and we just basically forgot how to make wine, or we stopped making wine and became a little confused. But the moment that was so important was the end of Prohibition, because at that point, instead of going back to France and all the places that were still making wine sort of anecdotally, we actually doubled down on science in the United States. We developed the University of California at Davis. We developed Cal State Fresno. We developed eventually Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Sonoma State, all these amazing, all these amazing schools in the United States that teach Cornell, University of Minnesota, and there's so many more. I don't want to leave anybody out. So please insert the name of your local wine university here. So the coolest thing is after Prohibition, we forgot how to make wine. So we had to teach ourselves again, and we actually used science to do so. So I like to say that post-Prohibition learning curve on wine technology and fermentation technology drove the United States to become the world leader in making clean, expressive, fault-free wine, which a lot of wine critics, and I know there's a sommelier out there going, "Ooh, they're boring." Yeah, they're boring, but you got to get to clean before you start understanding what typicity is. What is Burgundy's typicity from village to village when only tasting clean wines? We don't know because we've never done it. These wines commonly have Brettanomyces. They commonly have some amount of rusticity to them. So the rusticity is part and parcel to the typicity of the terroir, which is awful because I don't think terroir should include wine faults and lazy winemaking or pre-Enlightenment or sort of pre-Davis winemaking. I'm not saying wines have to be absolutely squeaky clean. I think sometimes a little bit of rusticity can add an amazing amount of complexity and interest to a wine. But in general, I don't want to drink dirty, shitty wines. That's just how I feel. This wine certainly isn't. It's bright, it's primary, and it's just smelling delicious. I'm going to finish up with the food pairing for Cabernet Franc. The other cool statement I have to give you, even if we go 30 seconds late. Who brought Cabernet Franc to the Loire? Who brought it to Chinon? You never believe it. In the 1600s, in the 17th century, it was Cardinal Richelieu. Remember, like your Western Civ, or maybe I just had the best Western Civ teacher in the world, which I absolutely did. Lorene Vale, Miss Vale, La Cañada High School, graduate of 1987 class. Thank you so much, Lorene Vale. She's not with us anymore, but she was probably the best teacher, one of the greatest teachers I've ever had. That's about all I have to give to you for Cab Franc, except the last bit, which is what I would match with this delicious, kind of rich, young baby of a wine if I was going to drink it tonight. Fried eggplant po' boy with a little bit of like sriracha mayo, I think would be amazing, as long as it's not too spicy. Venison steak smothered in chanterelle mushrooms in a reduction sauce made from the same wine. And then the other, I would do like a really stinky kind of dense double or triple creme cheese. My favorites in that world are like Latour or maybe Robiolo, what's a Lange cheese. And then some charcuterie would be absolutely spectacular as well. Cool, so that's where we're going. We're gonna try this again. That's it, boom, 15 minutes, one wine. I'm gonna be back in literally as soon as I can push these buttons again. And we're gonna start talking about how to set up a party and how to have enough liquid and various liquids to make everyone in your party happy. We're gonna talk about the fundamentals of party planning as far as liquids that change our attitude. Thanks again, and I hope you enjoyed a little talk about Cab Franc.